the risk of getting shadow banned, I'd like to cover some history that happened this year. I will be covering the series of often violent protests happening at conservative events in the United States between February and September of 2017. And I will state that these events together comprise what I see as free speech summer, or resist fascism summer, depending on your political ideology. Full disclosure, I support the free speech side of this debate, but I won't be debating the politics of the situation, rather I'll be reporting the who, what, where, when, and why of free speech summer. I'll be doing my best to represent the opinions of both sides and to present an accurate picture of what happened. Before I begin, I'd like to dedicate this video. All throughout this year, I've been watching, scared to death before each event, wondering if this would be the one where people would just start senselessly killing each other. I was holding my breath and waiting to see when the first death would be. When the first and only death came, I was surprised and ashamed to see that it was not caused by Antifa. Rather, it was a right-winger hitting a left-winger with a car. Despite Antifa lighting fires and throwing bombs and carjacking people, the first death was not caused by Antifa. I was speechless to see this. I disagree with Heather Heyr's opinions. I disagree with the group she was standing next to when she died in Charlottesville, and I despise the violent actions of those groups. But she was human, and she died too young. No matter how absorbed in politics we get, we should never forget about humanity. This video is dedicated to her memory. So we can start by figuring out why this happened. What variables stacked up to make these violent events possible? As I see it, both sides of the political spectrum had been building up to it for a while. On the left, the simplest and most obvious answer is Donald Trump. 2016 was the year of one of the most divisive elections in American history. Trump was the ultimate antithesis to everything that the social justice progressives believed in, and he was moderate and charismatic enough to be very popular. When he got elected, there was a sense of urgency and desperation that liberals felt, which I think a lot of non-progressives underestimated, and some people still do. For people who care about dreamers, they're not just making abstract political arguments, they're fighting for people's right to stay in the place they call home. For those who care about socialized healthcare, they're fighting for people who are scared of going to the hospital when they need it because they'll have trouble affording it. For Black Lives Matter supporters, the fight is about being able to avoid prison, and in some cases, about their very lives. And it goes on. For progressive liberals in America, Trump's election was a threat to people's lives, people's health, and the well-being of millions. Whether or not they were in danger, progressives felt that they had their backs to the wall. And a cornered animal will fight. Instances of liberal violence before free speech summer go back long before the start of it. An early example that got a lot of news coverage was Trump's campaign rally in Chicago in July 2016, which got cancelled because the organizers were afraid that rally-goers and angry protesters would get into fights and start riots. The event was cancelled hours before, but mass violence broke out anyway. The morning after the election results were announced, a video went viral on social media of a group of people pulling someone out of his car and beating him up, yelling, "He voted Trump, he voted Trump," before driving away in the victim's car. In early January, a group of Black Lives Matter supporters kidnapped a mentally handicapped white man for over 24 hours and Facebook live-streamed video of them pushing his head in a toilet bowl, extinguishing cigarettes on his skin, and cutting his forehead with a knife. The phrases, "fuck Donald Trump" and "fuck white people" could be heard in the video. Before I go on to the actual start of free speech summer, let me talk about the right. My assessment of the right is not backed up by any sources, it's just a collection of observations I've made by virtue of living in this year. Also, there are so many beautiful facial expressions in this photo. By far, the largest demographic group on the right is what I will refer to as the Fox News generation. They are middle-aged, middle-class, blue-collar workers, and small business owners. They are veterans, they are police officers and first responders. They have families, they have jobs. They are normal people who don't like the current tax code. They are the heart and soul of America. They respect the police, they don't consider themselves racist or sexist, and the progressive left reminds them of their own college-age children whom they see as inexperienced, overly dramatic, and lacking understanding of the business world and the economy. Demographically speaking, a huge portion of the progressive left are their own college-age children. The second significant demographic group on the right are young people. Their political journey is an ongoing one of searching for truth and being uncertain of facts. They may have been quote-unquote red-pilled by Gamergate, or some facet of feminist ideology that they disagree with, or by seeing someone else get socially destroyed for daring to question some facet of feminist ideology. They may have had their political awakening when WikiLeaks revealed the unfairness of the Democratic primary in 2016. The thing that all or most of the under 30 conservative crowd have in common is that they had some waking up moment where they discovered that the progressive ideology they had been taught to admire in their formative years is very flawed. The emotional investment I mentioned earlier that their progressive peers have in these ideas, their "you're either with us or against us" attitude they may have, and the deplatforming, doxing, and other kinds of targeting that many of them have been known to do, has only served to push this new young conservative demographic further away from the left. Something to keep in mind here is how new to ideological diversity these young people really are. Many of them do not know yet what their true political identity should be. What they know for sure, though, is that they are not and will never again be part of the social justice ideology. Because of this, they've come to adopt a pretty wide range of opinions, which I'll touch on later. So now that we have this somewhat more defined understanding of each side, we can more easily identify the causes. On the left, they saw people speaking out against things that they saw as basic human rights. In addition, they see a small subset of the young conservative group, itself a subset, that subscribe to actual Nazi principles. This tiny group of people proudly give Hitler salutes, condemn Jews, and laugh at human beings getting deported. To the left, especially the fringes, it is an obvious truth that these people are evil and dangerous. If they're not stopped, innocent people are going to die. This contrasted with the right's view of them as obnoxious and stupid, but with clear talents that are beneficial to pushing conservative agenda. Because of the left view, many of them don't bother to distinguish these race realists, as the Nazis call themselves, from other conservatives, or even from some moderates. If you don't support the DREAM Act, or transgender bathrooms, or Black Lives Matter, or whatever the relevant issue is, you're likely a Nazi in their eyes, either openly or closeted. So, with visions of new death camps and cessation of democracy running through their heads, the progressive left used physical, often deadly violence being legally defined as violence that could potentially kill, to commit acts which they saw as self-defense. On the right, here's another important note, and it's one that I will use to define Free Speech Summer. It is very hard to get the Fox News generation to turn out in large numbers for any kind of in-person political event unless Donald Trump himself is hosting it. The Chicago rally had more Trump supporters than liberal protesters because the Fox News generation turned out, and in many cases even traveled to see it, because Donald Trump was there. Inauguration on January 20th, which some will call the beginning of Free Speech Summer to my disagreement, had more Trump supporters than violent protesters because the Fox News generation turned out and even traveled to it, because Donald Trump was there. I will say that because of the large involvement of the Fox News demographic in Inauguration Day, that was not the beginning of Free Speech Summer. Free Speech Summer, which I see as a culture war between the young conservatives and the entire progressive left, began the night of February 1st at the University of California's Berkeley campus. To the young conservatives, they weren't fighting against a younger generation. They were fighting against a large demographic of their peers who were using violence to try and tell them what they were and weren't allowed to say. The stakes were high as they saw them. If they rolled over and let leftists dictate what speech wasn't allowed, they would essentially be allowing the country as they saw it to be governed by unofficial, unwritten hate speech laws. They would be showing their opponents that violence was an effective way to silence people and setting the precedent that riots and targeting of innocent people is okay. They would be allowing someone else to tell them that their opinion is wrong, and if they didn't like it, there was no place for them anywhere. There would be a slippery slope, and anyone with a wrong opinion would be a fair target for vigilante justice, like the justice that happened to the boy who was kidnapped in January, like the justice that happened to the man who got carjacked on November 9th. Like the justice that happened to all the victims of violent social justice warriors at the Chicago rally or at Inauguration, and there would be no punishment for the real criminals. This is why they don't give up so easily, why every act of violence against moderates was just fuel for the fire, rather than discouragement. They weren't willing to just disappear and be silent and live in fear of liberal violence. The line in the sand was drawn. The pivotal question at the center of this struggle was always, should hate speech be protected as free speech? This is important. This is the thing that is most likely to end up on an AP US history exam whenever this part of our history gets added to it. Milo Yiannopoulos, British right-wing provocateur, writer for the right-wing news outlet Breitbart, self-proclaimed troll, flagrantly in-your-face homosexual and ethnically Jewish. Very outspoken against Islam and feminism and so-called cultural Marxism that was and is happening on college campuses in America. Gave special attention to closeted conservatives on college campuses, and went on a so-called dangerous faggot tour, his own words, to speak at several colleges throughout 2016 and 2017. The Fox News generation, in my experience, thinks he's annoying and has a few screws loose, but pisses off all the right people. The Nazis, who would come to be known as the alt-right, dislike him for being a gay Jew. The young conservatives, though, love him. and eagerly eat up his words as he goes around with the motto, "No one can resist the truth," wrapped in a good joke. The University of California Berkeley campus was supposed to be just one more place to speak at during the dangerous faggot tour. Free Speech Summer would start and end with Milo Yiannopoulos at UC Berkeley. The reason that Antifa, the militant wing of progressive ideology, chose Berkeley of all places to begin this was because of one of Milo's most recent appearances in which he included pictures of trans students in his presentation and made fun of them. This, left-wingers say, opened those students up to targeted harassment. In order to protect the minority students on Berkeley's campus from potential harassment, Antifa's goal was to stop Milo from speaking, however they could. That, and Berkeley happened to be one of the places where Antifa was already organized and ready. Groups with the Antifa distinction, although decades old in Germany, were very new in America, only appearing on a large scale since the 2016 election. On the night of February 1st, the masked, black-uniformed members of Antifa rioted violently. Before the speech began, Milo was escorted off campus by security for his protection. The event was cancelled. Antifa's goal was met. They spent the night lighting fires on their own campus, smashing ATMs, ripping down police barricades, and physically hunting down quote-unquote fascists. Milo, meanwhile, got an on-the-fly live interview with Tucker Carlson on Fox News to speak about this breaking event. He got to address millions of people that night rather than dozens. National attention was brought to both Antifa and to Milo. People on both sides now had something to rally around. Across the country, progressive college students flocked to their local Antifa groups. Across the internet, conservatives and moderates were disgusted by pictures and videos of masked figures using pepper spray on innocent people, smashing ATMs, hitting an unconscious man over the head with a metal pipe, and photos of students with black eyes and bloody faces in the aftermath of the event. The significance of Berkeley to the progressive left was an important update to the internal debate of whether or not it's okay to punch a Nazi, which had been going on since video emerged online of someone punching race realist Richard Spencer. To everyone else, most people agreed that Antifa should not have initiated violence, and Berkeley police should have done more to maintain public safety. Shortly after the Berkeley riot, Tucker Carlson had another important guest on his show, elementary school teacher Yvette Falarka. She is an admitted organizer for the very same Antifa group responsible for the Berkeley riot, a group called By Any Means Necessary, BAM for short. This interview brought that character to prominence, and videos of her could be found online viciously, physically assaulting people on the street who had done nothing but stand with a sign. During the interview, she claimed that Milo Yiannopoulos was the good-looking public face of a racist, fascist movement. She claimed that the communities he endangered had a right to physically defend themselves. She would become one of the public faces of Antifa. Throughout Free Speech Summer, dozens, perhaps hundreds of individual events happened in local areas organized by conservatives and libertarians. Some events were advertised as being about various conservative opinions, such as anti-Sharia law marches or pro-life marches. However, most were openly focused on the singular issue of free speech. The rationale being that large cities, college campuses, and other predominantly liberal areas produced a social climate such that certain opinions could not be expressed without fear for one's physical safety, with Milo's speech at Berkeley being cited as an example. Many of these events happened, many were counter-protested by local Antifa groups, and each had a varying amount of people from each side, and a varying amount of police overwatch and intervention. Antifa groups sometimes clashed with event attendees, and occasionally with police, usually only at the more heavily attended events, though the severity of violence did gradually escalate as time went on, especially in Berkeley. In chronological order, I will discuss some of the most talked about events, what happened at each of them, and what their implications were. I believe many of these events I'll be talking about can be viewed as important place markers and turning points when looking at the timeline of Free Speech Summer as a whole. The first real big one worth mentioning happened on March 4th. It was planned and advertised to be the March for Trump. Get it? Get it? March for Trump? Funny joke.jpg. This one was pretty big, with dozens of local marches organized across the country on the same day. It was a march in support of President Trump, who had been receiving death threats on a regular basis from members of the progressive left. It was meant to inspire and show support to a controversial figure, the supporters of whom felt that he was underappreciated. Reports of injuries and arrests flew around social media throughout the day. Violence between Trump supporters and Antifa protesters happened at many of these events. The one event I want to look at in particular this day, though, is the violence that happened in none other than Berkeley, California. From this place, a short but important video clip emerged. It depicted a man wearing a Texas flag hoodie, a gas mask and a baseball helmet, an American flag wooden shield, and a stick the size of a baseball bat. Here's the video. Sound removed. This person was revealed to be 41-year-old Kyle Chapman, a commercial driver and a Trump supporter. He was arrested and had his gear confiscated at the March for Trump event, but was bailed out with money raised by right-wingers online, who had been busy making memes and having Photoshop battles of Base Stickman, as he came to be known. Base Stickman, who had little social media experience at all, would become one of the many icons of this movement, and would frequently show up to future rallies and receive attention therefrom. The discussion around Base Stickman on the right is important just as the discussion of punching Richard Spencer on the left was important. The video clearly showed that the victim of the stick breaking was an Antifa member who was already engaged in combat and acting aggressively. The mainstream line of thinking on the right after this event changed from non-violence even if violence is used against you so we can show the world that we are better than them, to violence in self-defense because they started it and because we won't let them beat us down again and again. I know that some would disagree with me, but I personally saw this shift as the beginning of a slippery slope towards discrediting ourselves. There was also another nationwide pro-Trump event like this one on March 25th. However, new faces and new ideas didn't emerge from this one, at least as far as I can tell. Another big event came, again in Berkeley, a free speech rally this time, on April 15th. This one introduced a few new characters and developments to the scene. First up, there's a higher-than-normal escalation of violence from this one. In particular, the fact that several M80 explosives were hurled from the Antifa side of the police barricade towards the free speech side of the police barricade. Video courtesy of Tim Pool.
Stop the bleeding first! Stop the bleeding! Oh, don't want to get tangled in that. M80! Somebody from the Antifa side just threw an M80 into the crowd. So during the fighting, there was about 7 M80s thrown into the crowd from the Antifa side. One of them landed next to an old woman who fell down trying to get away from it. I'm wondering if you or I know you don't speak for the entire group, but do you condemn the throwing of fireworks at people?
Well, the revolution isn't fucking easy. I mean, I got kneed in the face, pepper sprayed in the eye, and some guy tried hitting my head against a rock. And he was wearing a fucking Make America Great Again hat. So I guess that's sort of what we're trying to defend ourselves against. These people are coming in and they're trying to take away our rights, and they're passing legislation to take away our rights, and we're here to tell them that that's not fucking okay. They're here trying to posture up and say, oh look, we're so big and powerful, look at our movement, and we're telling them, no, you're not fucking welcome here.
Looks like Base Stickman is being arrested. What are you being arrested for?
I don't know. For being an American and for being a patriot. Self-defense.
So that was Kyle Chapman.
We love you, Base Stickman! That's him.
To my knowledge, we still don't know 100% for sure who threw the many explosives, but going by what I saw on Tim Pool's livestream, love that guy, we can be reasonably sure that an Antifa member threw the explosives. I mention this because I want to draw attention to the humanity of this summer in its entirety. It's a scary feeling to see that the people defending your right to speak openly are having explosives thrown at them. It's a scary feeling to know from practicality that milk is the best solution if you get hit with pepper spray. It's a scary feeling watching event after event waiting for people to start dying. Many people thought that an actual civil war or an actual race war would be the inevitable result of all the escalations in violence. In the same way I can't do justice to the anti-war movement or the civil rights movement because I didn't live it, I don't expect people born after this to be able to do justice to what it really felt like to live through the free speech movement. Anyway, on to new characters from this event. First up, there's a video of a college-age girl with dreadlocks wearing the black Antifa uniform in a fight with a grown man wearing a blue-collared shirt. This happens to be the same person that Tim Pool talked to. Here's the video. This one, for whatever reason, went viral. With all the hours of video from each of these events, it's hard to say why this particular case of violence, or why any particular case of violence, became spread around a lot online. After the video spread around, since most of her face was uncovered, people on 4chan's poll board were quickly able to find her name and Facebook account. She became sort of a hero to the progressive left in a similar way to how Base Stickman was a hero to the right. Her story is never yet, though. There were many attempts by people online to identify members of Antifa who were caught on camera committing crimes and report findings to police. People on 4chan were usually the leaders in this. The girl in this video wasn't wearing a good enough mask to hide her identity, but to my knowledge, she was not charged with any crime. People online, however, did connect the dots and find some porn videos of her online. From these videos, and her dreadlocks, she earned the nickname Moldylocks. This year was a journey. Along with Moldylocks, at this same event emerged the Bike Lock Basher. Here's the video for that.
That's what you want, right? You go right?
You go! I'm filming you. Oh, I'm gonna hurt you. You're gonna hurt you. Because you have a mask on. Oh, shit.
Oh!
Motherfucker.
Oh shit, he's bleeding. Yo, yo, yo!
Hey, medic!
He's bleeding! Hard!
Jump the target. Get out of here if I knew.
What? I don't even know what that was.
Backing out?
You're gonna be okay, bro.
Does anyone know what that was?
Oh my god, is he bleeding from his head?
Yeah. Ambulance is already coming, don't worry. They're already on their way.
They're a bunch of pansies. I don't even know. I think that big orange thing. There's some.
Got hit with a bottle. No, the bottle was thrown first.
Picture people, back up, guys. There you go.
Hey man, I was just sitting there talking to some people, and then they threw this big orange thing. I think there's this big like traffic blocker thing, and I was just sitting there talking to these two girls, and they were trying to swat this phone out of this lady's hand. And then
Thank you.
And then I was like keeping them from hitting the phone out of her hand, and then just I don't even know what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe some people up there know.
Was this all you? Is that
Yes, that
Oh
is.
yeah, man, I was blown away.
It's really bad. It's bleeding bad.
That was pretty weird.
Yeah, you need an ambulance.
Did you guys call 911?
We already called
Really?
and told them that
Ambulance?
You
we were
heard
right
that
here.
huge gash in their head.
Call 911.
Okay?
What? I
They
don't
need
even.
a tetanus shot because I don't know what you've been hit
Hey, I don't think. Where
are you from?
Yeah. I actually feel. Besides the pain up here, I don't feel anything.
Can I have his backpack?
Hey, watch out!
Let's go somewhere safe.
Go back up.
Walking over here.
To the tree, that way, that way.
Move him back.
He needs a medic bad. He needs a medic bad.
I'm a medic.
I mean, he needs a, you know what I'm
I'm a
saying.
medic.
This guy's with.
Yeah, I'm with him.
You alright?
Yeah,
That's what I meant, an ambulance.
Hey, get better, bro.
While this video is the most famous one, it is not the only video of this same person at this same event using that same weapon against free speech people. He could have, and one could argue he intended to, kill somebody. This is what I keep talking about when I say that every time I heard about one of these events, I would watch YouTube live streams waiting in fear to see someone die. Living through this stuff feels a lot different from reading about it. Videos of this guy went viral. Remember how I said 4chan kept trying to unmask violent Antifa members? Anons on 4chan did what they do with frightening efficiency and found the masked man's identity to be Eric Clanton. The evidence was given to local police, an investigation was started, and Clanton was arrested in May. I'll dip into an interesting, from my perspective, line of thinking for members of Antifa regarding the masks. They claim that they are victims of targeted harassment and that they wear the mask to protect their identity. The masks had certainly become a controversial element of their appearance. They claim that they use the mask to avoid getting doxxed, and also in solidarity with members of their group who commit violent crimes at these events. To this, my response would be anyone who commits a violent crime should be dealt with according to the law. I'm sad to hear that people interfere with the personal lives of those people based on their politics. I don't think any non-violent person should have their lives meddled with over political opinions. But to be fair, they are members of an openly violent group. It is possible to go to these events not wearing black clothes or a mask and not carrying any weapons, just a picket sign. I will still disagree with those people, but they won't have to worry about police, and they will face significantly less social backlash for their political beliefs. On June 19, 2017, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Hate speech is protected under free speech. This did not, however, end free speech summer. Not by a long shot. In the first half of August, Charlottesville happened. It started as a right-wing rally that was advertised heavily in conservative social media circles. It was called the Unite the Right rally. Unite the Right? Yes, unite. You see, as I mentioned before, the right was very fractured. It's a thrown-together collection of different groups, many of whom hate each other, but all of whom can agree that globalism and feminism are bad. People on the right had the most diverse collection of opinions I have ever seen. There were Trump voters who stood on both sides of the abortion issue, both sides of gay rights, trans rights, marijuana legalization, and countless other issues. Notably, there was a slowly growing group of people who support Nazi points of view. They despise central banking, race mixing and interbreeding, homosexuals, and yes, they believe that white people are superior to other races. These people, a tiny minority, were vocal. They were many of the people behind the things that 4chan was doing, and they were actively organizing. The term for them at the time was alt-right, a term which had previously been an umbrella term for all Trump supporters, but as racists used the term to preach segregation and race superiority, nearly all of Trump's base abandoned the label. Well, the Unite the Right rally was primarily organized by the alt-right. Yes, Nazis is an appropriate term in this context, as opposed to any other previous event whose attendees have been generalized as Nazis. The idea was to unify the conservative movement and destigmatize their opinions, at least to other conservatives. Nearly all of the speakers scheduled to be at the event were alt-right. Predictably, open and admitted racists made up the majority of people who turned out to this event. Many of them traveled from out of state to be there. On the night of August 11th, livestream showed a line of hundreds, probably thousands of people wearing polo shirts and carrying tiki torches chanting, "You will not replace us," as they marched down the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. This chant referred to the prediction that white people would make up less than 50% of America's population by the middle of the 21st century. They did not want to become a minority in their own country, as they are quick to remind people online who criticize their views. During daylight on the 12th, that's when things heated up. Antifa came out in force to oppose them. There were thousands of people on each side. Due to poor planning by the police, the barricades were down by midday, and alt-right and Antifa were mixed up and clashing all over. Sargon Avocad, famous moderate, anti-feminist, free speech YouTuber, said in one of his videos that if a giant pit opened up and swallowed both sides right then, the world would be a better place. Well, I don't think he was wrong. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned a girl named Heather Hare. Well, this is where she died. The free speech movement came a long way from nonviolence to show the world we're better than them. Video can be seen online of a car driving fast through a crowd of liberal protesters at the event. Heather was hit by that car and killed. Free speech rallies were not killed by Antifa. They were killed by the alt-right, who, instead of disproving Antifa's criticisms of conservatives, seem to be striving to prove them true by use of their own violence in response to Antifa's. To illustrate how much momentum was leached from the moderate right by the Charlottesville rally, I'll talk about the August 19th Boston Free Speech rally. This rally had a couple dozen attendees, including the Republican candidate for United States Senate from Massachusetts. This candidate, ethnically Indian with a loudspeaker, gave a calm, collected speech to his audience who had official campaign signs sporting the slogans, "Black Lives Do Matter" and "No GMO, Stop Monsanto." This is the furthest thing I have seen from a racial supremacist event. And yet, if we zoom out, about 50 yards away, stopped only by a police barricade, this small group was surrounded by thousands of counter-protesters, Antifa and otherwise. They were screaming and angry. They were assaulting police and doing things that warranted arrest. Antifa was acting as if these were swastika-flying skinheads, because many people on the left simply ignore the distinction between free speech activism and race supremacy, or they don't even see it. It took multiple police officers to escort the free speech activists out of the crowd safely. The scene reminded me more of Black Hawk Down than Black Lives Matter. Thankfully, I don't know of any significant injuries caused at this event. Stepping back a day in time now to August 18th. I'm going slightly out of chronological order here because this next one was not an in-person event. It happened online. I linked British political and cultural commentator Sargon Avocad's YouTube channel and his side channel The Thinkery in the sources and references for this video. Here's where they become pivotal. Most people are aware of the White House petition site, petitions.whitehouse.gov. At this point in time, the website was filled with many, many liberal petitions, which were all oversigned by people who were upset about Trump's election. A few, such as a call for President Trump to release his 2016 tax return, had long since met the goal for 100,000 signatures, but had not been answered by the White House, as they traditionally should have been. Among these many, mostly liberal petitions was one particular non-liberal petition. a petition asking that the federal government label Antifa as a terrorist organization. Antifa was already on the list of terrorist groups provided by the New Jersey state government's website. The national United States government, however, had been silent on the matter. Well, Sargon found out about this petition with its relatively few signatures, and he advertised it on his channel. First, on the 18th, on The Thinkery, a channel with well over 100,000 subscribers, the petition, over the course of the day, jumped by tens of thousands. When the momentum started slowing down a day after Sargon's video, he re-uploaded the video to his main channel, a channel which recently passed 700,000 subscribers. After this, the petition quickly passed the goal. On the internet, people were speculating that the White House would not respond to this petition because it would look bad if they selectively responded to that one and not the tax return petition. Sargon's video also opened up the debate of whether labeling Antifa as a terror group would help them recruit new members by virtue of the Streisand effect. The theory that the more an idea or group is censored or repressed, the more the public will want to hear about it. To the free speech movement's happy surprise, the Department of Homeland Security said something about the subject of this petition within 2 weeks of it passing the goal. An announcement stated that the DHS have been warning local law enforcement about Antifa groups classified as domestic terrorists since early 2016. Now back to what's happening on the ground. We are now well into September. Where do you think the next big event will happen? If you guessed Berkeley, California, you'd be correct. On September 14th, Ben Shapiro was scheduled to speak at UC Berkeley. Shapiro was not considered to be provocative like Milo was. Tim Pool describes him as a run-of-the-mill conservative. He was scheduled to speak on that campus, and yet there were still rumors of violent Antifa resistance being planned. The police force, though, was the difference this time. Perhaps they had been called out for not doing enough to stop violence and chaos at previous events, or perhaps the Department of Homeland Security announcement was enough to motivate them to go over the top with their preparations. In all, over $600,000 were spent on the event's security, and it paid off. Hundreds of police officers were there, protesters and attendees were kept far out of reach of each other, and anyone disturbing the peace was arrested or removed from the area. I believe some people may come to call this the end of free speech summer, but I have one more event to talk about, one which I believe marks a more complete and fitting end to it. For weeks ahead of time, Milo advertised via his YouTube channel and other mediums that during the week of September 21st, he and the conservative group on the UC Berkeley campus would be hosting a week-long free speech event. The hype felt big enough even to counteract the feeling of hopelessness after Charlottesville. The long list of speakers lined up included Steve Bannon, former White House strategist for President Trump, Ann Coulter, conservative political analyst, and Lauren Southern, conservative activist. Tim Pool planned weeks in advance to cover the events, and Sargon of Akkad announced weeks in advance he intended to make an appearance there. Milo's infinite wellspring of charisma made this seem like the event of the century before it even happened. The thing about overhyped events is that there are a lot of places where it's possible to underdeliver. As the story goes, there were two big setbacks to this event that happened very last minute. First, the line of bureaucratic red tape set up by the university successfully prevented the event from being affiliated with the university in any official way. This happened by virtue of an inconvenient deadline for paying a 5-figure security fee to the university, which, due to time zone differences and the early closing time of banks on the east coast of the US, Milo and the Berkeley conservatives could not meet. In response to this, Milo released a video before the event offering to reimburse people for their travel and hotel costs to attend the event. Free Speech Week was off Berkeley campus, but it would still happen in the city of Berkeley. The second big setback they met with was many of their scheduled speakers dropping out. Bannon and Coulter didn't come. Mike Cernovich, conservative broadcaster, did appear with Milo, as did the author of a soon-to-be-published book from Milo's own publishing company. But officially, that was all there was. Lauren Southern and Tim Pool both streamed videos from the event. Lauren claimed that while she was scheduled to speak there, poor communication from the planning team rendered her a normal attendee. Sargon did also show up. Many people got videos of him debating and having conversations with people on the streets of Berkeley. Many big names did show up, but it was far less structured and glorious than Milo led people to believe. This event had a modest turnout. To what degree this was caused by all the last-minute confusion and changes of plans, I don't know. There were more free speechers than at any other event I know of since Charlottesville, but not as many as the big Berkeley events from spring and summer. Going by the videos I saw, my impression was that more than 100 conservatives at any given location at the same time during the event was a rare occurrence. The event was only really a failure when put in context of Milo's overhyping. During one of the videos on his channel, after being evacuated by security from speaking to a crowd of dozens, Milo stated that it would have been important for him to speak if only one other person had shown up to the event. There was one big upside for the free speech crowd, however. Remember Yvette Falarka? She was arrested at this event. Following this event, Milo went on to schedule another speaking tour of college campuses, much like he was doing before the rise of Antifa in America. Free Speech Summer went out with as much of a bang as it could muster. Events from hereafter would have too low conservative turnout or too heavy police presence for riots or mass violence to occur again. The recent state of emergency in Gainesville, Florida in response to the Richard Spencer event is another example of this. Free Speech Summer ended with Free Speech Week at UC Berkeley. So now, let's talk about conclusions. My first point of discussion comes in the tone of a stern, disappointed father asking his recently ungrounded child, "What did you learn from this?" So, America, what did we learn from this? Thousands of people got injured, millions of dollars of property damage was caused, multiple millions of dollars in police and security were spent on these events, and at least one person died. What did we learn? What was it for? What was accomplished? Are we any more or less free than when this whole thing started? Are we any less likely to riot and kill each other in the future? The answer, as I see it, is no. We are not. Nothing has changed in our society. Antifa's goals were not met because people are still allowed to fly swastikas and preach racial hate. The free speech movement's goals were not met because people who are openly conservative are still discriminated against in many parts of the country. And, looking around, if people find the right cause to stand behind, they would be willing to do all of this all over again. Looking at the big picture, there has been very little change. So, why is this? Americans are a proud and idealistic people. We are quick to pounce on the cowering precursors to oppression and tyranny wherever we think we see them. Even if the problem isn't all that significant, even if it means we have to physically fight our fellow Americans. We will do it to preserve this abstract idea of freedom that we have. This is the reason that Puritan refugees were willing to leave behind everything their families have ever known in Europe and start a new civilization thousands of miles away across the ocean. This is the reason that neighbors tarred and feathered each other during the Revolution. It's the reason that people killed each other at Bloody Kansas and Harper's Ferry during the Free Soil movement. It's why Carrie Nation used an axe to attack bars during the temperance movement. It's why people were hit with high-pressure water and gunshots during the labor movement of the 20s and 30s, the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and the anti-war movement of the 70s. And yes, this is why thousands of Antifa and thousands of Kekistanis attacked each other throughout the summer of 2017. And you know what? This is part of who we are as a nation. It's part of what makes this place feel like home to me. America feels like home because anyone can say anything they want, no matter how stupid or offensive, and the government is not allowed to punish them. It feels like home because Luke Rudowski regularly plays devil's advocate for North Korea on his YouTube channel. It feels like home because white supremacists in YouTube comments are constantly trying to convince me of some big Jewish conspiracy. It feels like home because of feminists frothing at the mouth over the wage gap. It feels like home because of Christians telling me that porn is inherently evil. And it feels like home because some people still don't accept that the earth is flat. So I will take this country with all its flaws. I will take it with all its political division and hate and violence, as much as I don't like the violence. Because if we as a country toned it down and compromised on what we see as liberty, it would feel like millions of people all got a collective lobotomy. I will take this country as a whole. The good, the bad, the ugly. I'll take it all. God bless America. Till next time.